Good evening, everyone. Thank you once again for joining me on this Thursday evening for the Look into the Holy Book devotional. Now, I am your host, Charles Logan, uh, bidding a special welcome to not only our friends wherever you might be, but our online church family too. It's an unusual evening. I'm looking out the window at one of our desert monsoon storms with all the lightning and thunder, wind, and the roof leaks too. So thank you once again. It is a privilege for me to share these thoughts with you tonight. And these thoughts will be about saving our churches while saving our country. You know, we're being influenced by two destructive elements that are working almost hand in hand to fundamentally change the God that we worship and the country that we love. Now, we just can't get away from it. We're immersed in it from our sources of the media. We read it in our choices of publications. We hear it from the restaurant booth next to us. And there are signs in public arenas and private yards, not to mention those annoying bumper stickers. As much as we try, we just can't get away from them. They've saturated almost every public and private space that we have. And you know what I'm talking about, don't you? It's politics. And all of the signs and stickers and commentaries and discussions and news reports. We may talk about politics in the privacy of our homes, but we try to avoid the mere mention of it anywhere else for fear that there is someone who is passionate to the extreme, perhaps, one way to the other, or we do not want to get in a discussion or take a chance of offending a friend or starting an argument that no one can win. And it's surely going to cause bad feelings. Now, in private, we talk to our spouses and our friends, and we just can't fathom someone even considering supporting a radical that wants to fundamentally change our way of life. It becomes a very personal and passionate subject. The gap between the sides is becoming wider and deeper, and rational discussion or compromise is all but impossible now. Now, some want to see that proverbial glass ceiling broken more than they want to know the platform of the one trying to break it. Some want to see one candidate win simply because they hate the other one with a passion and care little about what they believe. You know, I think to myself, whatever happened to the belief in government for the people rather than a government that is influenced and financed by corporations that want a hand in control in exchange for their support? Now, in ancient Rome, votes were influenced by what benefits one could get from the government. Sound familiar? Bread and circuses became synonymous with government handouts to influence voters, like taxing one to provide services for another, to influence votes always. There are so many flaws in our system that can be compared to the mistakes that were made by people who came long before us. But because of the human condition, the very same mistakes are being repeated over and over again. Now, the results are always the same. The competition for power, using the people as pawns in their game of who is the most popular, or which would be ruler because they are better at misleading the people Or who could promise more? You know, it worked then and it works now. Tell them whatever they want to hear and they do what they want when elected. However, the rules of how to control the masses has taken on a new meaning since the Industrial Revolution. It is now is approached as a war between the classes. Now, the haves and the have-nots, the industrialists and the workers, the rich and the poor. You know, power is now gained by pitting one class against another. You say that's all ancient history? Well, how does that apply to us today? In this great United States of America, the land of the free and the home of the brave, the land of equal opportunity, and a place where even the voices of the disenfranchised can be heard? Well, what world are you living on? You know, I try very hard to keep most politics out of these devotionals because my intent is to focus on God and not man. But when man is so caught up in politics that he puts secondary importance to God, that's when we need to set the record straight. It's no secret that as the majority votes one way or another, we will see a drastic and potentially catastrophic change in our nation and ourselves. One way of protecting ourselves is to be armed with knowledge. What are the records of each candidate? And how does that record compare with promises that are being made? How are those candidates drawing those to their sides? Are they promising benefits that seem too good to be true? Are they creating a demonic image of the other candidate and those who support them? Are the issues not in line with our biblical teachings of morality? Is there a concentrated effort to create a wider division between the races? Or is there an effort to bring them together? Are they being influenced by such people as Karl Marx or Frederick Engels that pit one class against the other? You know, here are some things that I look for and apply when making that all-important decision. And by the way, these points can apply to both sides of the aisle, the front and the back and the balcony as well. First of all, do they believe that their end justifies the means? Is nothing off limits as long as they win? Do they promote redistribution of wealth or expropriation of all property so that the government can control public use? Do they promote heavy progressive taxes? And do they want to establish a larger tax on inheritance and eventually an end to all rights of inheritance? Do they want to confiscate the property of dissidents or rebels or people who don't agree with them? Do they want the centralization of credit in the hands of the state and as a preliminary monitoring bank accounts? Do they promote factories and instruments of production controlled by the state? Do they expect everyone to work and to be indebted to the state? Do they hope to blur the difference between city and state and reorganize boundaries to the advantage of the state so they can control the vote? Do they fundamentally want to change the concept of freedom by rewriting the Constitution and the Bill of Rights? Do they want to set the standards of what is free speech while defining what is hate speech and the need for censorship? You know, this is all very scary stuff. And depending on the results of this election, we may very well could become another secular European country where churches have been turned into museums that display those old, antiquated, and no longer used religious icons that have been so important to us in the past. Now, the second part of our devotional is what can we do to recognize the threats against our faith, against our Christian faith, and the attempts by some to fundamentally change God to come more in line with the social and moral perceptions of those who want to change our country. You know, we Christians can live in a country that no longer respects the individual, but we cannot live in a country that tries to eliminate our faith because it does not align with their secular agendas. We want to be educated on the threats to freedom rather than blindly following the masses. And I want to refer to an incident which is recorded in Acts 19 verses 21 to 42. Now this is about the Apostle Paul. Now Paul has been in Ephesus for some time preaching the gospel to whomever would listen. He has used public facilities where people gather and synagogues and theaters. He, though, has aroused the ire of some who feel that his message is a threat to their financial well-being. He has disrupted the status quo and is attempting to make a dramatic change. Now, the Silver Guild is angry because Paul has said that images of gods are not gods. They fear that the temple is in danger of losing influence and wealth. That's the temple of Diana. And of course, their own financial security. Now, Demetrius is the head of the guild, and he creates in Paul a symbol that they can all unite around in anger. Okay, Demetrius stirs up a frenzy using some of the very same tactics that the socialists would use in the 1900s. Now hear it from Scripture, starting in verse 24 of chapter 28. Now when they heard this, they were full of wrath and cried out, saying, Great is Diana of the Ephesians. Notice any parallels here with the monotonous chants of radical demonstrators in these riots that we've seen lately. Verse number 29, so the whole city was filled with confusion and rushed into the theater with one accord, having seized Gaius and Aristarchus, Macedonians, Paul's travel companions. And when Paul wanted to go into the people, the disciples would not let him. Then some of the officials of Asia, who were his friends, sent to him, pleading that he would not venture into the theater. Verse number 32, some therefore cried one thing and some another, for the assembly was confused, and most of them did not know what they had come for. Well, tactics for creating a riot have not changed over the years. All it requires is that someone to challenge the status quo, manufacture an individual or a cause that they can all rally around. They get whipped up into a frenzy and all together while repeating some monotonous chant. Many times most of them are no more than lemmings going along with the crowd, really not knowing what they're demonstrating about. In the case of the riot in Ephesus, the underlying cause was the new movement, the Way, the Christian movement, and the threat to the guild's profits. Now, while we have spoken about the importance of looking into the history of a candidate before supporting a politician or platform. There are similarities when being informed about the threats against our Christian faith and our churches. While it seems that politics is becoming increasingly secular, the radical agenda has unified behind a platform that views Christianity and the moral standards that we live by as a stumbling block to their liberal programs. Now, we live to value everything individual, and we hold firm to the sanctity of life, and especially of the unborn. We believe that God created man and woman for the purpose of glorifying him. We view God first, our country second. And we want to see our elected officials respect the same fundamental beliefs, even if they don't believe in them themselves. Now, we don't want to see a nation that was founded upon Judeo-Christian values devolve into a secular nation that no longer allows God to be a guiding influence. Now, here are some, I would call them warning signs to look for from those who would remove or redefine Christianity and our churches to fit into a radical agenda. Look for these points. Government supporting fringe groups that ridicule all things Christian. Limiting free speech where it exposes blasphemy for what it is. Censorship of conservative Christian information from public social media outlets. Hostility to those who champion the rights of the unborn. Viewing the Bible as an outdated set of unnecessary rules, and even hate speech. Now, encouraging young people to question their God-given sex at birth. Encouraging grade school children to read inappropriate literature. And all of these things are an attack upon Christians and the morals that we live by. But there's also another insidious attack on Christians and churches, and that is from the inside. Those who would claim to be Christians, who view the Bible as a changeable document, just like their views on the Constitution. They profess love and inclusion, and at the same time leave out or completely reinterpret parts of Scripture. They see it as a book that must be changed to align with the new social agenda of diversity and acceptance and inclusion, an agenda that places God in a secondary place next to the new religion of social justice. But it's not too late to save our country from the forces that would turn us into a nation that our founding fathers would not recognize today. And it is not too late to recognize the attempts to regulate our Christian values, relegate them to as unimportant in a radical agenda that craves only perpetual power and control. We can make a difference. We can make a difference. We can make the choice to save our nation under God. We can openly express our opinions and mark a ballot having been informed and educated in the candidates and the programs that they support. And we can and we must stand strong and vigilant against the attempts to radically change the God that we worship and the country that we love. Well, here we are again at the end of another devotional, and once again, thank you for sharing this time with me. I consider it one of my greatest privileges. So, Lord willing, we'll be together next Thursday at the same time. And until then, I'm your host, Charles Logan, wishing you a great week until we can meet again. Thank you and good evening.